An important person in the world died on June 8, 2018. And it wasn't just a famous cook who died. Fans were sad about the death of a man who brought people together through food, travel, and brave stories. Anthony didn't just speak for the food world. His words spoke for everyone who had ever been bored, interested, or hungry for more. There were many things in his life that were not as good as they seemed. Brunel's ex-wife, Octavia Bourdain, kept quiet about the problems in their marriage for many years. Now, though, she's talking about what it was really like to be married to a man whose genius was only matched by his chaos. Watch this movie to see what she has to say. You see, Anthony Bourdain was born in New York City on June 25, 1956. From the start, he was surrounded by smart people, cultured people, and a little chaos. French Catholic Pierre was his dad. He spent the summers in France and worked in the classical music business. Gladys, his mother, was a strict editor at the New York Times. You'd think Bourdain would read Proust and play the cello as a child with parents like that, not going into restaurants to eat and eating oysters straight from the boat of a fisherman. Growing up in Leonia, New Jersey, wasn't like most kids' lives in the suburbs. He had plenty of love and attention, but he wished he had his friends' wild, unsupervised freedom. He was doing his duty by joining the Boy Scouts, and was probably told to show respect for the French side of the family. But deep down, he wanted to do something more radical. Anthony's first taste came up when he tried an oyster on a family trip to France. It changed everything. It was 1973 when Bourdain graduated from Dwight Englewood School. He then went to Vassar to try out college. Once he had been in school for 2 years though, the hot, messy kitchens of Provincetown, Massachusetts, where he worked at fish restaurants like the Lobster Pot, were more appealing. Bourdain's new classroom was the energy, grit, and cast of strange people working behind the line. He quit Vassar and went for it. Because of this choice, he went to the Culinary Institute of America to improve his skills, and graduated in 1978. After that, Bourdain quickly became famous in New York City, where he worked in kitchens at popular restaurants like Sullivan's and 1/5 Avenue. But even though he knew how to cook a steak and write a menu, his real strength was telling stories. In fact, Bourdain was working hard on Manhattan's Lower East Side in the mid-1980s to become a writer, long before he became the famous food traveler we all knew. He began sending unasked for writing to a nearby literary magazine called Between C and D. A Cook on the Hunt for Heroin was one of his first stories that got published. A rough and true story that showed how chaotic the food world was for him. That wasn't all he did. In 1985, he signed up for a writing workshop run by the famous editor Gordon Lish, who was known for being very critical. This helped him improve his rough voice, but it wasn't easy for him to break through even though he was talented. A Random House editor liked Bourdain's writing enough for him to get a small book deal in 1990. Bone in the Throat, his first book, came out in 1995. The book was a murder mystery about food, and it had all the wit and edge you'd expect from Bourdain. However, it didn't sell very well. He wasn't going to give up, so he paid for his own book tour and hit the streets to sell his work. After a few years, his second book, Gone Bamboo, came out and did just as badly. That could have been the end of the dream for most people. But Bourdain wasn't most people. Even though the writing didn't pay off right away, it set the stage for what came next: TV. When his first book, Kitchen Confidential, came out, it blew the lid off the food business and put him in the public eye. The Food Network became interested in him right away, because of the way he was brutally honest, sarcastic, and deeply respectful of food and culture. They gave him a cook's tour as his first show, which started in 2002. The idea was easy to grasp: eat everything, see the world, and talk about it. It was a 2-season show, but that was just the start. By 2005, Bourdain had hit his stride with Anthony Bourdain. There are no bookings on the Travel Channel. It wasn't like any other food show. There was a lot to eat, but what made it special was how Bourdain became friends with people. It had nothing to do with fancy places. It was about street food, customs in the area, and the stories behind the foods. He could mix humor with deep understanding in a way that made you laugh one minute and think deeply the next. When Bourdain and his team were filming in Beirut in 2006, it was one of the most intense times of the show. When the conflict between Israel and Lebanon broke out, what started out as a normal shoot turned into a terrifying event. While stuck in a hotel with other expats, Bourdain wrote about the stress, fear, and humanity of the situation. The crew was finally rescued by U.S. Marines, with the help of a local fixer he called Mr. Wolf, after the cop in Pulp Fiction. That episode wasn't just about food, it was also about staying alive, being strong, and how strife can bring people together in strange ways. It got Bourdain nominated for an Emmy, and cemented his image as a storyteller who could talk about anything. No one else had a sound like Bourdain's. Nigella Lawson once said that he had a very beautiful writing style that could go from being very literary to very funny and rude, all in the same sentence. But while Bourdain was having a great time in public, his personal life was very unstable. Anthony and Nancy Pukowski's first marriage began in a way that reminded me of a high school romance. Bourdain followed Nancy to Vassar College in New York because he liked how wild she was. They met at Dwight Englewood School in New Jersey. Things got better between them, and by 1985 they were married. Nancy was there for Bourdain when things were tough in the beginning of his job as a chef, and helped him move up in the world of cooking. Things started to change for Bourdain as his career took off, especially after Kitchen Confidential became a hit. They started to go in different ways because of the fame, the constant travel, and the attention. Nancy liked her life to be less busy and more private, so she wasn't too excited about all the attention that Bourdain was getting. Their marriage began to fall apart over time, and in 2005, they got a divorce. That being said, Bourdain always had good things to say about Nancy and how she helped him. Anthony's life changed when he met Ottavia Bucea, an Italian businessman and mixed martial artist. They met after his marriage to Nancy Pukowski ended. Famous cook Eric Ripert, who is close friends with Bourdain, set them up because he thought they would make a great pair. Even though they were 22 years apart in age, Bourdain and Ottavia had a lot of energy. Ottavia was running a diner in New York at the time. It was called Geisha. They quickly became friends because they both liked restaurants. Ottavia didn't take the usual route to the US or work in restaurants. She was learning to become a dentist in a small town in Italy before she changed her mind and quit. She came to the US with only $300 in her pocket. It was hard for her to find work in New York's restaurants, but she finally got the job as general manager of Geisha. That's where she met Bourdain, and they were able to connect right away. Bourdain was interested in her trip, and the two of them quickly became attached. They became together very quickly. In a short time, they were already talking about getting tattoos. By 2007, Bourdain had settled his divorce, married Octavia, and had a child. Their friendship grew stronger as they talked about Octavia's day for hours after her long shifts at the restaurant, and Bourdain's work in the business before. For them, this was an important way to connect, even though it might have seemed boring to other people. Over the course of their relationship, the couple had to deal with the problems that came with their busy jobs. While Bourdain's fame grew, he spent more and more time away from home. Octavia kept working right up until she gave birth. Their busy routines made it hard for them to keep everything in balance. But no matter what, they were still connected, because they both loved food, culture, and how random their lives were. No matter how much Bourdain loved being a dad, his job made it hard for him to balance family life, because he was going to places no one knew. He was on the road almost 250 days a year. His marriage started to suffer because he was away so much. His love for his daughter, and the happiness being a dad brought him, couldn't keep his relationship with Octavia together. They made the hard choice to split up in 2016. This time, Anthony moved on with Asia Argento almost right away, just like he did after his first marriage. Even before the divorce was official, it was like a teenage crush when Bourdain met Asia Argento for the first time. His friend Steed said that Bourdain was so crazy about her that he couldn't help but gush. He compared it to the thrill of his first serious relationship. There was no denying their spark, and their relationship quickly grew stronger. There was no stopping Bourdain's love for her, both in interviews and on Instagram. He had always been known for being honest. As their friendship grew, it was clear that Bourdain was fully committed. He spoke out in favor of Argento, especially after she became a leader in the Hashmi II campaign. He liked how brave she was when she spoke out against Harvey Weinstein, and he was always there for her. They were close in more ways than one. It was based on respect for each other and a common understanding of their jobs. But even though their love was strong and fierce, it wasn't always easy. Both Bourdain and Argento had busy jobs that required them to travel a lot, which kept them apart for long periods of time. They chose to keep their relationship open, which meant that each could go their own way while still being close. This arrangement worked for a while, but the time and space between them made things tense in the end. Because of how serious they were, and how busy their lives were, things got complicated and were hard to handle. He seemed happier than ever with Argento in his life, though. He talked about how much happier he was with her, and how he felt like he had never felt so happy and fulfilled in a long time. He didn't want to get married again, but he was willing to live with her, being comforted by how simple their bond was. Bourdain always put work first, and he liked that Argento understood and accepted that. They tried to make it work by having what they called a free relationship, which meant that each person could do what they loved while still being mentally close to the other. This plan worked at first, but the time difference and busy schedules eventually made things harder, and their relationship began to fall apart. But what no one saw coming was that it would end in Anthony's sad death. Before he died, Bourdain seemed to be suffering from a lot of different emotions, being tired, being alone, and being very unhappy with his life. It used to be that he loved fame, but now it felt like a cage to him. He didn't like the attention, the demands, or how it seemed to keep him from the things that used to be most important to him. It seemed like he had less of a connection to the real world as he got rich, and the space between them seemed to get bigger. Both of his relationships were coming apart, and it was clear that they were having a hard time with each other. They were no longer as intense and passionate as they used to be. There were reports that she was having an affair, which hurt him. He felt betrayed, especially when he found out that it had happened in a hotel that had special meaning to them. He couldn't handle the emotional weight of it all. He tried to get in touch with Argento and ask if there was anything he could do to make things better, but he was rudely ignored. Their link, which had once been very promising, had broken down into a pointless back and forth that made him feel even more alone. It seemed like Bourdain was pulling farther away from everyone as the hours went by. He was going through a terrible time emotionally because of his personal problems and the stress of his job. He was left with feelings of emptiness and loss, and no matter how hard he tried to find a way through, he could not get away from the terrible sadness that hung over his last days. Anthony Bourdain's quick and shocking death on June 8, 2018, shocked everyone. Parts unknown was shooting in Kaisersberg-Venoble, France, when Bourdain was found dead in his hotel room at Le Chambord Hotel. His close friend and fellow chef Eric Rippert found him. It was because Bourdain missed breakfast and dinner the next day that Rippert went to check on him. He learned the sad news that Bourdain had killed himself. People who knew Bourdain and liked his work couldn't believe the news of his death broke like wildfire. Bourdain was known for being brave, funny, and able to connect with people from different countries. He seemed unbeatable to many. It broke my heart to see that even people who seem to have everything and make a lot of people happy can have problems inside. Many people who respected Bourdain were devastated by his death, and what happened next was just as shocking. After he died, his ex-wife Ottavia Busia talked about their relationship, giving the public a look into the complicated parts of Bourdain's life that hadn't been known before. In the wake of Bourdain's sad death, his ex-wife Ottavia wrote about the hard time she went through after they broke up in 2016. In the documentary Roadrunner, she talked about how Bourdain's mood changed over time after they stopped working together. The lively, daring spirit she used to have seemed to fade, weighed down by a mental weight that grew stronger over time. When Bourdain chose to go to therapy, Ottavia felt better at first. It looked like a good step, and she thought he was dealing with his problems. She felt like she could take a step back and trust that he would find a way to move forward. She said that she deeply regretted not keeping a closer eye on him during those important times when she looked back. The documentary showed the whole story of their relationship, from how they met through Eric Rippert, to their marriage, and then to their choice to split up. Even though they were no longer married, they still had a strong bond, which made his downward slide even harder for her to deal with. Her thoughts show how complicated and often contradictory it is to care for someone who is having a hard time, the hope that things are getting better, the guilt of stepping back, and the deep-seated sadness of always thinking what more could have been done. Anthony also had problems with drugs, which is another part of his life that isn't talked about enough. Alcohol and drug problems were more than just a part of Bourdain's life. They were a part of his messy, raw life that made him so interesting. In the 1980s, Bourdain was stuck in a cycle of drugs while working in the tough world of New York City kitchens. At the time, the chaos in the food business only made his habits worse, and he kept falling deeper and deeper into addiction. He looked through his rugs for what he hoped were leftover pieces of crack when he was at his worst. The sadness wasn't something Bourdain tried to hide. When Kitchen Confidential made him famous, he was extremely honest about the years he spent fighting drugs and the hopelessness that came with them. He talked about what it was like to be stuck in a downward slope and feel like no matter what you did, you couldn't get out. But in the middle of all the chaos, Bourdain decided he had to change. He gave up cocaine and heroin, but he still drank a lot. It wasn't a perfect healing story, but he made a choice that let him follow his dreams and share his unique point of view with the world. Bourdain's journey was easy to relate to, because he wasn't afraid to show the flaws. Even after he had done well, he didn't act like giving up drugs took away his problems. He was honest about his ongoing fights with depression and the heavy thoughts that sometimes made it hard for him to think. He was honest, which helped a lot of people, especially those who worked in the stressful food business. Proof that even the most famous people had to deal with the same problems. But now that he looks back, his connection with darkness was not simple. In his work and interviews, he talked about death and suicide a lot. He didn't say these things to shock people, but it seemed like he was always talking about his own pain. These thoughts weren't just fleeting ones. They gave hints of a fight that never really ended. It's hard to deny that his last act was the conclusion of fights he had been having for a long time.